Welcome to Photographic Preservation, Module 4 of 7, Part 1, Conservation of Photographic Materials. There are two basic ways to approach conservation. Preventive conservation focuses on preventing problems by, for instance, controlling environmental and storage conditions. It's usually applied to entire collections. Module 3, Storage, Display, and Handling, focused on preventive conservation. This topic is also addressed in some of the other modules as well. The second type of conservation is remedial or curative conservation, which is what this module focuses on. Remedial conservation addresses damage that has already happened or is happening due to ongoing decay processes. It's usually done on a piece-by-piece basis rather than to whole collections. Our goal here isn't to teach anyone how to do photo conservation, but to review what kinds of things conservators can do to treat damaged photos and what risks are associated with these treatments, so that you can make informed decisions about seeking conservation treatment for your photos. Because most remedial conservation techniques come with at least a little bit of risk to the item being treated, it requires conservators to balance the damage that has already happened and will go on happening if nothing is done, against the risk of damage posed by the treatment. The Missouri Secretary of State's office, the Missouri State Archives, and the Local Records Program assume no liability for any damage that may occur as a result of treatments attempted or authorized based on information in this program. Remedial conservation of photographic materials can address many common problems. You may be looking at things that are dirty, stuck to something, cut, torn, broken, cracked, or missing parts, curled, rolled, or otherwise distorted, stained or yellowed, or that have reflective or iridescent areas. We're going to talk about treatment options for all of these issues. Most of these options are not things we recommend trying at home. You'll need to seek help from a professional conservator. If your photographs are dirty, the answer is surface cleaning. This is one of the most basic forms of intervention that conservators do, and usually the first thing done to items being treated. Surface cleaning refers to techniques for removing dust, dirt, and other deposits from the surface of the item. There are several reasons to do this. Mainly, dust and other deposits are detrimental to photographic materials in multiple ways. These range from inhibiting our ability to view the image, to abrasion, to chemical deterioration. A video on the Missouri State Archives YouTube channel, Let's Talk About Dust, provides more detailed information about dust, what it does, and how to deal with it. A link to this resource is in the description for this video. Treatments to remove dust, dirt, and other deposits are typically divided between mechanical, also called dry or non-aqueous, and chemical. First up is a mechanical surface cleaning technique that, with some limitations, is generally safe for everyone to do. Lightly attached particulates, also known as dust, can typically be blown or brushed off whatever they're resting on, and this is usually safe to do as long as the photo is in good condition, like this one of representative green. If, however, the photographic materials look anything like this glass plate negative, dusting becomes very risky. If the image layer is cracked, peeling, flaking, or damaged in any way, dusting could dislodge and blow or brush away parts of the image, leading to permanent losses. That's not something we want, so it's best to leave those items alone. To remove dust, we can either use an air bulb, which has a squeezable air reservoir and a nozzle to direct the air, or a soft brush. Conservators prefer brushes with white or light colored bristles, so we can see when they get dirty and need to be washed and dried before reuse. Don't use compressed air. It's too forceful and may contain chemicals or water vapor. Since we don't want to just move the dust around on the photo, it's important to work systematically, either from the center of the photo towards the edges like this, or from one side to the other like this. When it comes to more firmly attached dirt, conservators often use erasers. To minimize damage from this technique, conservators use abrasive-free, sulfur-free vinyl erasers or eraser crumbs. The eraser is rubbed over the image using gentle pressure, which allows the dirt to become adhered to the eraser instead of the image, after which the eraser bits can be brushed away. Risks from this technique include abrasion from the eraser or dirt, burnishing, which changes the appearance of the photo, and tears if the eraser snags on a weak point or existing damage in the photo. And no matter how careful, erasing dirt leaves some eraser particulates and residues behind. For the most firmly adhered deposits, conservators may use a scalpel or other sharp tool to scrape it off. This is considered a high-risk technique. It's easy to go from scraping off a fly speck to scraping the photo. It's often done under magnification, so conservators can see exactly what they're doing. Chemical cleaning methods are, if anything, even more risky than mechanical methods and require accurate identification of the photographic process used. Chemicals that are generally safe for one type of photo may completely destroy another that looks very similar. Even safe chemicals often cause irreversible changes to the appearance of the photo. Another risk is that chemical cleaning may cause the binder or emulsion to swell and absorb the dirt, trapping it in the photo image. When conservators decide that the risks are manageable and preferable to not using chemical cleaning methods, they have several choices as to how they do this. One of the most commonly used techniques is to use cotton swabs, dampened with the appropriate solvent, to clean specific areas of the photograph. This uses limited amounts of solvent in limited areas, which limits the risks. When the deposits are more generalized, the conservator may use a poultice to apply the solvent evenly over the whole photograph or larger area. Gel poultices often incorporate a tissue layer to keep any poultice material from being left behind on the photograph. Sometimes the conservator may choose immersion, usually using the same kinds of chemicals that were used to process the photographic materials originally. One of the common types of damage to photographic materials is sticking together in undesirable ways, either to other photographic materials or to other things, like picture glass or documents intermingled with the photos. There are many potential causes of adhesion or cohesion. These include mold, which happens when mold filaments grow through multiple items, heat, pressure, moisture, and chemical decay, and of course adhesives, which are intended to be sticky. The photos in this example show the damage that can happen when separation is forced, two pieces of the image layer detached from the photo on the right and stuck to the back of the photo on the left. These two photos of Frank Frisbee were also stuck together from residual tape adhesive on the back of the smaller photo. When they came for conservation, parts of the image layer had already become detached from the larger photo. Separation involving an image layer almost always results in some unmitigated damage. We were able to separate these two photos and reattach the major fragments of the image layer, but as you can see, there remain small losses. Unmounting removes photographic materials from something they were deliberately attached to, or something like tape that was used to deliberately attach the photograph to something else. It uses many of the same techniques as separation. In case you missed it, tape is evil. The adhesives and plastic carrier can damage adjacent materials as they age. Please don't use tape on your photographs. Unmounting is usually done because the mount either is damaged or is causing damage to the photograph, as in this example here. Mounts are often important for the intended look of an image, contain important information, or help make the image easier to handle safely. Cased photographs and early card-mounted photographs should not be unmounted in most circumstances. In other cases, the original mount may need to be replaced or retained with the image. In this example, after unmounting and mending both items, the mount and its information were retained with the photograph. Servitors typically use a combination of mechanical techniques with aqueous, chemical, and/or thermal techniques to separate or unmount photographic materials. We may need to experiment a bit, carefully testing options around the edges of the photograph to find the combination of methods that will work best. That's because the success and potential for unmitigated damage depend on a lot of different factors, including the type of photographic process, the materials used, the cause and duration of the adhesion, and the age of the materials. Each treatment project will be at least a little bit unique, so what worked well in one set of circumstances may cause significant damage in another. Potential damage includes complete or partial loss of the image, either dissolved or detached, physical distortion or damage, tide lines or staining, and changes to the appearance of the image, such as color or sheen. In spite of all the risks, it is possible to successfully separate photographic materials in many circumstances. An example of unmounting you may be able to do at home involves magnetic photo albums, the ones that promised easy scrapbooking by sticking your photos to the adhesive lines, and the ability to endlessly peel up and reposition the photos later. Unfortunately, the adhesives used for these albums aren't safe for photos in the long term. As the adhesive degrades and yellows, it damages the photos in contact with it, and the adhesive tends to either fail or freeze. Failure allows all the photos to fall out of the album, which isn't ideal, but is actually the better option as you can just put them in a new album, preferably one that passed the photographic activity test. More commonly, the magnetic lines harden and adhere firmly to the photos, freezing them in place. It's sometimes possible to unmount the photos from these albums using dental floss and possibly gentle heating to soften the adhesive. Keeping the floss flat against the page, slip it under one corner of a photograph and gently pull through to the other side. It's very important not to pull up on the floss against the edges of the photo, as this may cause the floss to cut through the photo instead. Gentle heating from a hot pad or hairdryer set on low may help soften the adhesive, but it's best to test this on an album page without photos first. While this technique may help rescue your photos from the clutches of a magnetic photo album, it is not risk-free. Be sure to work slowly and carefully. Start with the photos you care less about, and don't do anything if you aren't comfortable with the risks involved. Many older photographic materials have physical damage that affects both the support and image layers. Often this damage is due to fragility that results from the chemical decay and inherent vices of the materials. Mends, fills, backing, and lining are all methods for repairing damage such as tears, breaks, and losses by adhering additional material to the photograph. Repairing damaged photos has multiple benefits, both aesthetic and practical. In this example, the loss from the grommet was filled using a combination of opaque tissue, similar to the color of the image and cut to fit the area of loss, and a much thinner tissue adhered to the fill and photographed from the back. While not invisible, it's a lot less noticeable than the grommet was. And by filling the gap, we eliminate a potential weak point in the photograph, where something might snag and cause more damage. Since these repairs involve adding new material to the photograph, the materials and techniques have to be carefully selected so they do not cause damage to the photograph either during the mending process or as the repair materials age. Mounting uses similar techniques to these various repair methods, but is typically done for aesthetics, display, or to fulfill the photographer's artistic intent. Another form of mending or repair that conservators may do is consolidating and flattening cracked, flaking, or delaminating image layers. Photographic materials are typically complex, multi-layered items. Those different layers respond differently to environmental conditions and physical stresses. This may lead to situations where the image layer deteriorates much more than the support layer. As in this example, where physical distortion of the metal support of this tent type led to cracking and loss of the less flexible image layer. Moisture, solvents, or heat may be used to soften a brittle image layer, allowing it to be flattened without additional cracking, or for fragments that have shifted out of place to be carefully repositioned. Flaking, loose, or detached areas of the image layer may be consolidated by wicking small amounts of a low viscosity adhesive into the cracks and under fragments. The usual cautions about water, solvents, and heat apply, but the alternative is usually progressively worsening image loss as more and more fragments of the image layer detach. Except for a few rare photographic formats, we generally want our photographic materials to be flat. If they're not, the treatment is humidification and flattening, or just flattening for some things. For most types of photographs, humidification allows the paper fibers, binders, and emulsions to relax, so a rolled, curled, or folded photograph can be flattened without cracking or breaking. A simple humidification chamber can be made with a plastic tub, a wet towel, and a piece of plastic grid. The idea is to create an enclosed space with higher humidity. In this setup, the wet towel provides the moisture source, while the plastic grid keeps the materials being humidified from getting wet. In this sequence, a tightly rolled document is unrolled as it is humidified. Items should be humidified until they feel cool to the touch and flexible. After humidification, place them between sheets of blotter paper, a type of thick absorbent paper with weights on top. A thin board can be used to distribute the pressure from several smaller weights. If the image layer is water sensitive, put a sheet of baker's parchment paper between the image and the blotter to prevent sticking. Photos that are not too stiff or brittle, or things with non-paper supports, can also be placed directly under weight without humidifying first. Discoloration may be the result of localized stains or tide lines, like in this example, or it could be the result of yellowing of the support or binder due to age or inherent material instabilities. These problems can potentially be addressed by a conservator through washing, bleaching, or various stain reduction methods. Although the location of these problems lies within the photographic materials, rather than on the surface, there are many similarities between these treatments and chemical surface cleaning. There are also treatment methods unique to these problems. For instance, a method used only to address overall yellowing is light bleaching, in which the photograph is exposed to certain wavelengths of light while immersed in a solution. As with other methods involving chemicals, these are high-risk treatments that require accurate identification of the photographic process. If your photograph is looking more like a mirror, it's probably affected by an inherent vice of silver gelatin emulsions, called silver mirroring. This problem can affect any photographic process that incorporates silver, which unfortunately includes most historic photographs. This is a complex problem that develops when oxidation causes the formation of silver ions, which then migrate either toward the support layer or the surface of the emulsion. This change in the way silver is distributed in the image layer creates areas that may look bluish metallic, bronzish, or iridescent, depending on the severity, lighting conditions, and viewing angle. It may develop only around the edges of the photograph, only in particularly dark areas of the image, or be present throughout. Causes include exposure to high humidity, acidic materials, and oxidizing agents like oxygen, sulfuric acid, and compounds containing chlorine or other halogens. Treatments may involve removing some of the silver, applying a coating, or attempting to reverse the oxidation through contact with other metals, like aluminum, or various chemical treatments. As with many issues affecting photographic materials, prevention remains a better choice than remedial treatment. Along with washing and bleaching, silver mirroring reduction treatments are not just high risk, but considered controversial in the conservation community because of the risk level, lack of reversibility, and a lack of research on the long-term effects of these treatments. Inpainting is a set of techniques used to restore visual unity to images with missing areas. Because of the ethical considerations, inpainting photographic materials is fairly rare, may be considered more a form of restoration than conservation, and is usually done only for images where display of the original image and good aesthetics are desired. When deciding whether to inpaint losses or not, conservators consider many factors, including the photographic process used, the materials and their condition, the image's history and context, and its intended use. Any loss compensation done has to be harmonious with the original photograph and conservation ethics. Ethically, the inpainting must be detectable on examination, so it's always possible to tell what parts of the image are original and what was added. It also needs to be reversible, so the changes can be removed if later desired, and it has to be based only on what can be inferred from the parts of the image that still exist. It would be ethical, for instance, to inpaint missing parts of a fence, where the fence line and stile can be clearly seen, but not to add a dog beside the fence, even if told one was there, because there isn't enough information about what the dog looked like. When selecting materials used for inpainting, conservators consider both the ability of those materials to achieve a visual match to the photograph and the need to prevent damage caused by adding new material to the image. Digital inpainting is a less controversial option because the original image can always be preserved, while also showing how the image likely looked without the damage. It can be done with both digital images of physical photographic materials and with copies of original digital images. In this image of the damaged photograph of Dr. Gray, digital inpainting compensates for the large loss. Conservators can do a lot with remedial conservation techniques, but we're not miracle workers. We can't unbreak things. Once something is broken, those breaks are there forever. But we can mend things to hold all the pieces together and keep the damage from getting worse. Similarly, we can't reverse chemical deterioration, but we can slow down damaging chemical decay processes. We can't make lost material reappear, but we can do a lot to compensate for those losses in ways that improve material stability and make those losses less visually intrusive. And finally, we cannot make things last forever. forever is a very long time. But we can substantially increase the longevity and usability of historic materials, so they'll be around for us to view, study, and enjoy for a lot longer than they would without conservation. As most of this presentation is focused on what conservators can do for your photographs, you may be wondering how to hire a conservator, especially one with expertise in the conservation of photographic materials. The American Institute for Conservation, the main professional organization for conservators in the United States, has a good guide to hiring a conservator and a searchable database of conservation professionals in the United States. We also talked about blotters as part of humidifying and flattening. Blotters intended for conservation work are available from conservation suppliers such as Telus and Gaylord. Blotters are also available from art supply stores, and versions intended for flower presses are available from sites like Amazon. Links to these resources are available in the description for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something useful about the conservation of photographic materials today. Stay tuned for Part 2 of Module 4 of our Photographic Preservation Workshop, which covers emergency salvage techniques.